I'm Madison Hayes, 28 years old, and I never thought I'd be filing a police report against my own parents. But there I was, hands shaking as I dialed 911, watching my neighbor's security footage of my mother and father driving away in my brand new Audi, a car I'd owned for exactly 6 days. The car I worked 3 jobs to afford, the car I hadn't even made the first payment on, was now in the hands of my irresponsible two-year-old sister who had totaled her last 3 vehicles. Before I dive into this nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family take advantage of your kindness. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how I finally stood up to the people who were supposed to protect me, not steal from me. To understand why I called the police on my own parents, you need to know our family history. I've always been the responsible one, while my younger sister Amber was the golden child who could do no wrong. Growing up in our suburban Connecticut home, I learned early that my achievements would always be overshadowed by Amber's needs. When I made honor roll, my parents would nod distractedly. When Amber barely passed a class, they'd throw a celebration dinner. I started working at 16. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. My parents made it clear that my college fund had been reallocated to pay for Amber's expensive dance competitions and private tutoring. Madison's smart, my mother would tell relatives. She'll figure it out. And I did. I worked weekends at a local cafe, evenings at the library, and summers doing administrative work at my uncle's law firm. By the time I graduated high school, I had saved enough for my first semester at State College, where I earned a partial scholarship. Meanwhile, Amber cycled through 3 different private schools, each more expensive than the last. When she crashed her first car, a brand new Honda my parents bought for her 16th birthday, they replaced it within a week. The second car lasted 4 months before she rear-ended someone while texting. The third car made it almost a year before she let her boyfriend drive it drunk and wrap it around a tree. This pattern of taking my things for Amber started small. My clothes would mysteriously migrate to her closet. The laptop I bought for college ended up in her room after her computer broke. When I got my first apartment during junior year, my mother asked if Amber could stay for a weekend during her college visits. That weekend turned into 3 months, with Amber occupying my bedroom while I slept on my own couch. Family helps family, my father would say whenever I protested. Your sister needs this more than you do. After college, I worked 2 jobs to pay off my student loans while building a career in digital marketing. I was determined to be financially independent, knowing I couldn't count on my family for support. When I finally paid off my debt last year and earned a promotion at work, I decided to reward myself with something I'd dreamed about for years. A brand new Audi A4. Not the most expensive car, but sleek, reliable, and most importantly, mine. For 3 years, I researched, saved, and planned for this purchase. I created spreadsheets comparing models, insurance rates, and financing options. I built my credit score to secure the best loan terms. When I finally walked into the dealership last month, I knew exactly what I wanted and what I could afford. The day I drove it home was one of the proudest moments of my life. I invited my parents over to see it, hoping foolishly for some acknowledgement of my achievement. It's a bit flashy, don't you think? My mother said, circling the car with a critical eye. You could have helped your sister with her rent instead. My father just asked about the monthly payments and shook his head. You always were extravagant, Madison. I swallowed my disappointment, reminding myself that I hadn't bought the car for their approval. I'd bought it for me, with my money, as a testament to my hard work. What I didn't know then was that they were already planning to take it. Just last Christmas, I had caught my mother going through my closet, selecting items for Amber, who had an important interview coming up. When I objected to her taking my best blazer, one I had just purchased and hadn't even worn yet, my mother acted as if I was being unreasonable. You have so many nice things now, Madison. You can afford to be generous with your sister. That blazer, like so many things before it, disappeared into Amber's possession, never to be returned. But a blazer wasn't a car. A blazer wasn't worth $38,000. A blazer wasn't something I was still paying for. I should have seen it coming. The way they had asked detailed questions about my financing, the comments about Amber's transportation struggles since her last accident made her uninsurable, the surprise visit the day after I brought the car home, when my father had asked to see the key fob just out of curiosity. All the signs were there. I just never thought they'd go this far. Last Tuesday started like any other workday. I woke up at 6:30 a.m., made coffee, and prepared for my morning client call. At 7:45, I grabbed my bag and headed out to the parking lot of my apartment complex, where I'd left my new Audi parked under a streetlight for extra security. Except it wasn't there. My first thought was that I'd forgotten where I parked, which was ridiculous because I always used the same spot. My second thought was that it had been towed, but I had a valid parking permit clearly displayed on the windshield. The third and most terrifying thought hit me like a punch to the stomach. My car had been stolen. I ran back to my apartment and called the property manager, who confirmed they hadn't towed any vehicles overnight. Next, I called the police to report the theft, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. While waiting for the officers to arrive, I called my neighbor Trevor, who I knew had a security camera facing the parking lot. "Let me check the footage," he said. 5 minutes later, he called back with information that changed everything. "Madison, I don't think your car was stolen, at least not by strangers. The video shows your parents pulling up around 11 p.m. last night. Your dad got out, used a key to get into your car, and drove it away while your mom followed in their SUV. I felt like I'd been doused with ice water. That's not possible. They don't have a key." But even as I said it, I remembered my father examining the key fob, how he'd walked into the kitchen with it briefly before returning it. He must have made a copy. I canceled the police report for vehicle theft and tried calling both my parents. Straight to voicemail. I texted them, "Where is my car?" No response. Then my phone pinged with an Instagram notification. Amber had posted a new photo of herself posing next to my new Audi with the caption, "New wheels. Best parents ever." My vision actually blurred with rage. I called my friend Leah, who lived nearby, and asked if she could drive me to my parents' house immediately. 30 minutes later, we pulled into their driveway in suburban Fairfield, where my Audi was prominently displayed like a trophy. I banged on the front door until my mother opened it, her expression shifting from surprise to calculated calm when she saw me. "Madison, I wasn't expecting you." "Shouldn't you be at work?" "Where's my car?" I demanded, pushing past her into the house. My father was in the living room reading the newspaper as if it were any normal day. He looked up with mild annoyance. "Lower your voice, Madison. We have neighbors. I want my car back. Now." My mother sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "Your sister needed it more than you do. Her commute to the new internship is 40 minutes each way, and after her last accident, no insurance company will cover her at a rate she can afford. So you stole my car? A car that's in my name? That I'm paying for?" My father folded his newspaper carefully. "We didn't steal anything. We're your parents. We've given you everything you have." "You've given me nothing," I shouted, years of resentment bubbling over. "I've worked for everything I have. That car is mine. I saved for 3 years to buy it." "And your sister has been through a difficult time," my mother countered. "She lost her job, broke up with Kevin, and her therapist says she needs positive reinforcement right now. The car is a fresh start for her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So buy her a car yourselves." My father's face hardened. "We would if we could, but our finances aren't what they used to be. Besides, you're established now. You can get another car." At that moment, Amber bounced into the room, twirling my car keys around her finger. She stopped short when she saw me. "Oh, hey Maddie. Mom and Dad told me you were cool with this." She didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. They lied. "I'm not cool with having my car stolen." Amber rolled her eyes. "God, you're so dramatic. It's just a car. You always have to make everything about you." My mother put her arm around Amber's shoulders. "Madison has always been selfish. Remember how she wouldn't share her dolls when you were little?" I stared at them in disbelief. This wasn't about childhood toys. This was grand theft auto. "I want the keys. Now." I held out my hand. My father stood up, suddenly intimidating. "That's not happening. Amber needs this car, and as part of this family, you need to support her. If you can't accept that, maybe you shouldn't come around for a while." The ultimatum hung in the air between us. In that moment, I saw my family clearly for perhaps the first time. They weren't just favoring Amber, they were actively taking from me to give to her, and they expected me to thank them for the privilege. "You're right," I said quietly. "I shouldn't come around anymore." I walked out, Leah following close behind. In the car, she asked, "What are you going to do now?" I pulled out my phone, something I should have done years ago. "I'm going to stand up for myself." Back in Leah's car, I sat shaking not from fear, but from a newfound resolve. For years, I'd accepted my role as the family piggy bank, the responsible one who could be counted on to give up whatever Amber needed. Not anymore. "Are you sure about this?" Leah asked as I pulled up the local police department's number. "They're still your family." "Family doesn't steal from each other," I replied, though my stomach churned at what I was about to do. Before making the call, I contacted my bank to confirm what I already knew. The car was solely in my name. The loan, the insurance, the registration, all mine. Legally, my parents had no claim to it whatsoever. Next, I called Ryan, Leah's boyfriend who worked as a paralegal at a law firm specializing in property disputes. "Technically, this is grand theft auto," he explained after I detailed the situation. "The fact that they're your parents doesn't change the legal reality. They took your vehicle without permission using a duplicate key they made without your knowledge. That's theft. Will the police even take this seriously? They might see it as a family dispute." "Show them the documentation proving ownership," Ryan advised. "Be clear that you want to press charges. And Madison, prepare yourself. This will change your relationship with your family forever." I already knew that relationship was irreparably damaged. With trembling fingers, I dialed 911. "I need to report a theft," I told the dispatcher, my voice steadier than I expected. "My car has been stolen." When the police arrived at Leah's apartment 20 minutes later, I could see the officer's skepticism as I explained the situation. Family disputes weren't high on their priority list. "Ma'am, are you sure you didn't give them permission to use the vehicle?" the older officer asked, clearly hoping to resolve this without paperwork. I produced the car's title, insurance documentation, and loan papers. "The car is solely in my name. I'm making the payments. I did not give anyone permission to take it. They made a copy of my key without my knowledge and took it while I was sleeping." The younger officer reviewed my documents and nodded. "These appear to be in order. Do you know where the vehicle is now?" "At my parents' house. And I have video evidence of them taking it." I showed them Trevor's security footage on my phone. Their demeanor changed. This wasn't just a squabble anymore. It was a documented theft. "There's one more thing," I added, opening the Audi app on my phone. "The car has GPS tracking." I showed them the pulsing blue dot that represented my vehicle, now moving along the interstate. "My sister is driving it right now." The officers exchanged looks. "We'll need to call this in," the older one said. While they contacted dispatch, my phone exploded with texts from Amber. "What the fuck, Madison? Police pulled me over. They're saying the car is stolen? Mom and Dad are freaking out. You called the cops on your own sister?" Then came the calls from my parents. I let them go to voicemail, but listened to the messages immediately. "Madison Hayes, you call off these police officers right now. How dare you embarrass this family like this?" My mother's voice was shrill with rage. "You've gone too far this time," my father growled in his message. "Don't bother coming to Thanksgiving, or Christmas, or any family event ever again." I expected their anger, but what I didn't expect was how liberated I felt. For the first time in my life, I wasn't capitulating to their demands. I wasn't putting Amber's needs above my own. I was standing up for myself. The officers returned from their cruiser. "The vehicle has been located and stopped on I-95. The driver, your sister, I presume is being detained until we can sort this out." "I want to press charges," I said firmly. "Against all of them. My parents and my sister." The younger officer looked uncomfortable. "You understand they could face serious consequences? Grand theft auto is a felony." "I understand. And they understood what they were doing when they took my car. They just didn't think I'd do anything about it." As the officers left to meet their colleagues at the traffic stop, I received another barrage of texts. this time from extended family members who had already been contacted by my mother. How could you do this to your own blood? Your poor sister was handcuffed on the side of the highway. Your parents gave you everything, and this is how you repay them? I turned off my phone, suddenly exhausted. Leah sat beside me on her couch, offering silent support as I stared at the wall, wondering if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. But later that evening, when the police called to inform me that my car was at the impound lot and could be retrieved the following day, I felt something unexpected: pride. I had finally drawn a boundary and enforced it. What happens now? I asked the officer. Your parents and sister have been formally charged with theft of a motor vehicle, he explained. They've been released on their own recognizance until the court date. You'll need to appear as well. I hung up and turned to Leah. I just sent my family to court. She squeezed my hand. No, Madison. They sent themselves to court when they decided to steal your car. For the first time since discovering the theft, I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Not tears of sadness or regret, but of relief. The weight of being the family doormat had finally been lifted from my shoulders. The morning after pressing charges, I woke up to 37 missed calls, 62 text messages, and a flurry of social media notifications. My private family matter had become very, very public. The texts came from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Cousins, uncles, aunts all suddenly had opinions about my decision to involve law enforcement in what they deemed just a misunderstanding. Most were predictably outraged, citing family loyalty and the unwritten rule that family problems stay within the family. Your grandfather is in tears, wrote my Aunt Patricia. How could you do this to your parents who sacrificed everything for you? Another cousin posted on Facebook, imagine being so materialistic you send your own sister to jail over a car. Some people don't understand what family means. The narrative being spun was clear. I was the villain in this story. The selfish, ungrateful daughter who cared more about possessions than people. Only one relative reached out with a different message, my mother's sister, Aunt Jessica. Madison, I just wanted you to know that not everyone thinks you're wrong, her text read. What your parents did was illegal and unfair. I've seen how they treat you compared to Amber for years. Call me if you need to talk. Her support was a lifeline I hadn't expected. We arranged to meet for coffee that afternoon. Meanwhile, my phone continued to explode with messages from my immediate family. My mother's texts oscillated between rage and manipulation. I carried you for 9 months, and this is how you repay me? Your sister is having panic attacks because of what you did. If you drop the charges now, we can pretend this never happened. My father's approach was more direct. You've brought shame to this family. Fix this or don't consider yourself our daughter anymore. Amber, predictably, played the victim. I can't believe my own sister would try to ruin my life over a stupid car. Everyone at work knows I got arrested. My boss might fire me. Thanks a lot, Madison. Then came the family group text, a thread I'd been excluded from. My cousin Ryan, who I'd always been close with, screenshotted it for me. In it, my mother painted a completely fictional narrative. Madison has always been jealous of Amber. We tried to help both our girls equally, but Madison has such expensive taste. She bought this luxury car she can't afford, and when we expressed concern, she completely overreacted. Now she's trying to punish us by pressing these ridiculous charges. Please pray for our family during this difficult time. The responses were a chorus of support for them and condemnation for me. People who had never set foot in our house or witnessed the dynamics of our family were suddenly experts on my motives and character. That afternoon, when I met Aunt Jessica at a cafe far from my parents' neighborhood, I finally broke down. They're turning everyone against me, I sobbed, making me look like I'm crazy or vindictive. Aunt Jessica reached across the table and squeezed my hand. They're doing what they've always done, controlling the narrative. Your mother has been manipulating people since we were children. She's an expert at making herself look like the victim. But why are people believing them? They stole my car. Because it's easier to believe that one person is being difficult than to accept that the perfect family isn't perfect at all. People have invested in your parents' version of reality for years. Challenging that is uncomfortable. As we talked, I received a notification that I'd been tagged in a social media post. Amber had shared photos of herself sobbing dramatically, with a caption claiming, "I had always been abusive and finally showed my true colors." Friends I'd known since high school were commenting with support for her and shocked disbelief at my actions, but the worst was yet to come. That evening, I discovered that years of my childhood photos had disappeared from my cloud storage account. My parents, who had set up my first email address and knew my security questions, had accessed my accounts and deleted irreplaceable memories. The next day, my boss called me into her office with a concerned expression. "Madison, I received a strange call from a woman claiming to be your mother. She said some troubling things about you taking company property and having a history of theft. Obviously, this doesn't align with what I know of you, but I needed to address it." I was mortified but explained the situation truthfully. My boss was understanding, but advised me to keep my personal drama away from the workplace. That night, I broke down again in Leah's apartment, where I'd been staying since the incident. "They're trying to destroy me," I whispered. "My reputation, my job, my relationships, they want to punish me for standing up to them." Leah, who had been my rock through this ordeal, suggested I make an appointment with a therapist. "This isn't normal family conflict, Madison. This is abuse. You need professional support to process this." That night, scrolling through yet another barrage of hostile messages, I found an email from my cousin Ryan that made my blood run cold. He had overheard my parents discussing their strategy for dealing with me. They hadn't impulsively taken my car. They had planned it weeks in advance, expecting that I would cave as I always had. My standing up for myself had thrown their plans into chaos, and they were determined to force me back into line by any means necessary. I forwarded the email to my lawyer, then turned off my phone and finally allowed myself to cry for the family I thought I had, for the support I'd never received, and for the young woman who had spent decades trying to earn love that should have been freely given. 2 weeks after pressing charges, I received official notice of the court date. Despite the continued pressure from family members to drop the charges, which had now escalated to include distant relatives I'd only met once or twice, I remained firm in my decision to pursue justice. On the advice of my lawyer, Jennifer Kumar, I had documented every instance of harassment and intimidation. The file was disturbingly thick. "This will strengthen our case," Jennifer explained during our preparation meeting. "It shows a pattern of manipulation and demonstrates why you felt you had no choice but to involve law enforcement." I had hired Jennifer using most of my emergency savings. My parents, meanwhile, had retained Martin Green, one of the most expensive criminal defense attorneys in the state, a fact that didn't escape my notice given their claims of financial hardship when explaining why they couldn't buy Amber her own car. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived with a sick sense of unreality. I had never been inside a courtroom before, and the formality of the proceedings heightened my anxiety. As I sat beside Jennifer, the courtroom door opened, and my family walked in. My mother, dressed conservatively in a navy suit, made a show of dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. My father, stern-faced in his best business attire, kept his arm protectively around Amber, who had apparently decided to play up the fragile victim angle. She wore no makeup, her hair was pulled back simply, and she looked younger than her 22 years. The performance was clearly for the judge's benefit, and I felt a surge of anger at their calculated approach. Jennifer seemed to sense my reaction and placed a steadying hand on my arm. "Let them play act," she whispered. "We have facts and documentation." When the proceedings began, my parents' attorney immediately went on the offensive, painting me as an entitled, vindictive daughter who was using the legal system to punish my family over a misunderstanding. "Your Honor, the Hayes family has always shared their resources freely amongst themselves," Green argued smoothly. The vehicle in question was understood to be a family asset, despite the technicality of being in my client's daughter's name. Madison Hayes is well established financially and has access to other transportation, while her younger sister desperately needed reliable transportation for her new employment opportunity. Jennifer was prepared for this angle. When her turn came, she methodically presented the evidence: my sole ownership of the vehicle, the loan in my name, the insurance policy I paid for, the security footage showing my parents taking the car in the middle of the night, and the GPS data confirming its location. "Furthermore, Your Honor," she continued, We have evidence that the defendants planned this theft weeks in advance, making a duplicate key without Miss Hayes's knowledge or consent. This was not a family misunderstanding, it was a premeditated crime. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing, reviewed our documentation carefully. Mr. Green, do your clients dispute that they took the vehicle without Miss Hayes's explicit permission? My father leaned forward to whisper something to Green, who then addressed the court. Your Honor, the defendants believed they had implicit permission based on the family's history of resource sharing. The judge looked unimpressed. Ownership documents and loan agreements are not implicit. They are legally binding contracts. Does Miss Hayes have any history of allowing others to use this vehicle? No, Your Honor, Jennifer replied. The car was purchased just 6 days before the theft. The judge turned her attention to me. Miss Hayes, are you seeking the return of your vehicle at this time? Yes, Your Honor. And do you wish to continue pursuing criminal charges against your family members? I felt 3 pairs of eyes burning into me from the defense table. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment they expected me to crumble under pressure and family obligation. Yes, Your Honor. I do. A small gasp came from my mother, as if she couldn't believe I was actually going through with it. The judge nodded. The vehicle is to be returned to Miss Hayes immediately. Based on the evidence presented, I'm allowing the criminal charges to proceed. We'll schedule a formal hearing for next month. In the meantime, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order prohibiting the defendants from contacting Miss Hayes except through legal counsel. As we left the courtroom, my mother attempted to approach me, but was quickly intercepted by a bailiff who reminded her of the judge's order. The look she gave me was pure venom. The following day, I went to retrieve my car from the impound lot where it had been held since being recovered. What I found made my stomach drop. The pristine interior I had so carefully maintained was now littered with fast food wrappers and spilled drinks. The new car smell had been replaced by cigarette smoke. Despite the fact that neither Amber nor my parents smoked, there was a long scratch down the passenger side, and the check engine light was on. They trashed it on purpose, I realized, fighting back tears. The repairs cost nearly $2,000, money I could scarcely afford after paying Jennifer's retainer. But as I drove my car home, finally back in my possession, I felt a sense of validation. They had tried to take this from me, to punish me for daring to establish independence, and they had failed. That evening, I received a formal letter from Martin Green, warning that my parents were considering a countersuit for defamation of character and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Jennifer assured me it was an intimidation tactic with no legal merit, but the message was clear. This battle was far from over. Despite the stress and financial strain, I felt a strange sense of peace as I parked my damaged but reclaimed car outside my apartment building. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly standing on my own without the emotional baggage of trying to please people who could never be satisfied. They can't control you anymore, I whispered to myself as I locked the car and walked away. Not unless you let them. 3 weeks after the preliminary hearing, my grandmother called with a peace offering. She had always been more balanced in her treatment of Amber and me, though she rarely intervened in my parents' parenting decisions. This family feud has gone on long enough, she said firmly. Your grandfather and I are hosting a dinner this Sunday. Your parents have agreed to come and discuss this situation like adults. Will you join us? I hesitated. The restraining order was still in effect, but could be temporarily waived for a mediated family meeting. Part of me wanted to refuse outright, but another part, the part that had been raised to prioritize family harmony above all else, couldn't help but hope for reconciliation. I'll think about it, I promised, and immediately called Jennifer for advice. Legally, you can attend with proper documentation waiving the restraining order for this specific event, she explained. But Madison, are you emotionally prepared to face them? They've shown no remorse for their actions. My grandparents have always been fair, I reasoned. Maybe with them mediating, my parents will actually listen. Jennifer sounded skeptical, but agreed to prepare the necessary paperwork. Just remember, you don't owe them forgiveness. And you can leave at any time. Sunday arrived with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I drove to my grandparents' suburban home, parking my repaired Audi in the driveway, a silent statement that I wasn't backing down. Grandpa opened the door, enveloping me in a warm hug. "There's my girl," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Let's get this family back together, shall we?" The scene inside was surreally normal. My mother was helping Grandma in the kitchen. My father was watching golf on the living room television. Amber was texting on the couch, barely looking up when I entered. Dinner was a tense affair, with conversation limited to safe topics like the weather and Grandma's garden. Only after dessert was served did Grandpa clear his throat and address the elephant in the room. "Now, we're here to mend fences," he began. "This family has been torn apart, and it's time to put things right. Madison, your parents have something they want to say to you." My mother set down her coffee cup, her expression carefully composed. "Madison, while we still feel you overreacted drastically, we recognize that taking the car without discussing it with you first was inconsiderate. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd expected. We'd like to put this behind us," my father added. "Drop the charges, come back to the family, and we'll all move forward." I took a deep breath. "I appreciate you saying that, but I need to know this won't happen again. I need respect for my boundaries and my property." "Of course," my mother said, a bit too quickly. "We've always respected you, Madison." The blatant lie hung in the air, but Grandma jumped in before I could respond. "Let's focus on the future, not the past. More coffee, anyone?" The conversation shifted, and I found myself cautiously relaxing. When Amber actually asked me about my work project, showing interest in my life for perhaps the first time ever, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this intervention had worked. After dinner, Grandpa suggested my father and I talk privately in his study while the others cleaned up. It was awkward but civil. My father avoided discussing the car theft directly, instead reminiscing about my childhood and expressing pride in my career success compliments he'd never offered before. When we rejoined the others, there was a palpable sense of relief in the room. The evening ended with tentative hugs and promises to talk more later. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Perhaps this was the beginning of a healthier relationship with my family. That illusion shattered the moment I unlocked my apartment door. Something felt wrong immediately. Items on my coffee table had been moved slightly. A drawer in my kitchen wasn't fully closed. With growing dread, I moved through my apartment, cataloging discrepancies. My bedroom had been searched thoroughly, dresser drawers slightly ajar, closet items rearranged. My home office showed similar signs of intrusion, but it was my jewelry box that confirmed my worst fears. My grandmother's antique sapphire ring, a gift for my college graduation that had been in the family for generations, was missing. So were my laptop, tablet, passport, birth certificate, and the folder containing my car's documentation. With shaking hands, I called Leah. "They did it again," I whispered. "They distracted me with that dinner, while someone broke into my apartment." "Are you sure it was them?" she asked. Though we both knew the answer. Who else? They had motive and opportunity, and they know exactly what would hurt me most. I called the building manager, who confirmed that no maintenance staff had entered my unit. The security cameras in the hallway had conveniently malfunctioned that afternoon. There was no sign of forced entry. They still have a spare key, I realized aloud. When I'd moved in 2 years ago, I'd given my parents a key for emergencies. After the car theft, I'd asked for it back, but my mother claimed to have lost it. I'd meant to change the locks but hadn't gotten around to it. I was still processing this violation when my phone pinged with a social media notification. Amber had posted a new selfie wearing my grandmother's sapphire ring. The caption read, "Family heirlooms are meant to be shared. Thanks, Mom, for passing this down to me." This second betrayal, coming so soon after their apparent willingness to reconcile, felt even more devastating than the car theft. They had orchestrated the entire evening, the dinner, the conciliatory conversation, the one-on-one time with my father as a distraction to access my apartment. I immediately called the police to report the break-in and theft. The responding officers were the same ones who had handled my car theft case, and their expressions were grim as they recognized me. "You think your family did this?" the older officer asked, taking notes. "I know they did. My sister is literally wearing my stolen ring on Instagram right now." They took my statement and photographed the apartment, but warned me that proving who had entered would be difficult without surveillance footage or signs of forced entry. When they left, I called Jennifer. "I need to amend the restraining order and add more charges," I said, my voice steady despite my inner turmoil, "and I need to sue them civilly for the value of everything they took." "Madison, I have to ask, are you prepared for how ugly this could get? They've already shown they'll go to extreme lengths to punish you for standing up to them." I looked around my violated apartment, at the space that had once been my sanctuary now tainted by their intrusion. "They've taken enough from me," I said firmly. "They don't get to take my self-respect, too." The next day, I filed a second police report, changed my locks, purchased a security camera system, and began the process of placing credit freezes and fraud alerts on all my accounts. If they had accessed my important documents, identity theft would be their next logical step. Sure enough, within days, I received notifications of credit card applications submitted in my name. Amber had apparently decided that if she couldn't have my car, she'd use my identity to finance her lifestyle in other ways. The family dinner had never been about reconciliation. It had been about silencing me, punishing me, and showing me that no matter what legal protections I sought, they could still reach me. The message was clear: drop the charges, or the escalation would continue. Instead of intimidating me, their actions had the opposite effect. The last lingering doubts I had about pressing charges evaporated. The people who claimed to love me had proven, beyond any question, that they viewed me not as a daughter but as a resource to be exploited. "No more," I vowed as I documented the new evidence for Jennifer. "This ends now." A week after the apartment break-in, I received an anonymous email with the subject line, "Evidence you might need." The sender had created a temporary account that couldn't be traced back to them. The email contained screenshots of text messages between my parents discussing their plan to claim my car on their insurance as if they had purchased it for Amber. They had apparently taken photos of my documentation during the break-in with the intent to forge my signature on a title transfer. Who sent this? I wondered aloud, scrolling through the damning evidence. The final message gave me a clue. "I can't openly support you because of my position, but you should know they tried to involve me in insurance fraud. If you need verification of these messages for court, contact me through my personal email, not my work address. Ryan W. Ryan Wilson, my second cousin, who worked at the insurance company my parents had used for decades. I vaguely remembered him from family reunions, a quiet man a few years older than me who had always been polite but distant. I immediately forwarded the evidence to Jennifer, who confirmed it would strengthen our case significantly. "Insurance fraud is a federal offense," she explained. "This raises the stakes considerably." That evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was my Aunt Patricia, the same aunt who had texted me about my grandfather being in tears over my decision to press charges. "Madison, I owe you an apology," she began without preamble. "I believed your mother's version of events without question, and I've been horrible to you." "What changed your mind?" I asked cautiously. "I saw Amber wearing your grandmother's ring, the one I watched Grandma give to you at your graduation. When I asked about it, your mother claimed you'd given it to Amber to make amends. I knew that couldn't be true, so I started questioning other things they've told us." Patricia wasn't the only one. Over the next few days, several family members reached out with similar stories. They had accepted my parents' narrative until something didn't add up: Amber's spending sprees despite supposedly being broke, my mother's contradictory explanations, my father's aggressive deflections when questioned directly. "It's like watching dominoes fall," Leah observed as I showed her the supportive messages, now balancing out the hostile ones. "Once people start questioning one lie, the whole structure becomes unstable." Not everyone was coming around, of course. My parents still had firm allies in the family, and they were escalating their campaign against me. The latest attack came in the form of my health insurance being abruptly canceled, a devastating blow, as I was in the middle of important therapy sessions to process the ongoing trauma. "They were the policyholders," my insurance representative explained apologetically. "They have the right to remove dependents at any time." I was 28 years old with a good job, but had remained on my parents' family plan because it offered better coverage than my employer's options. Another tie I needed to sever. The financial hits kept coming. Credit cards continued to appear in my name. requiring hours on the phone with fraud departments to dispute. My email was flooded with confirmation notices for expensive online purchases I hadn't made. My student loan servicer called to inform me that someone had attempted to change my payment information. They're trying to ruin me financially, I realized as I spent yet another evening untangling the damage. The legal fees, therapy costs, and now new health insurance premiums were straining my budget to the breaking point. But I wasn't without support. Aunt Jessica offered me a loan to cover the most pressing expenses. My boss, seeing my struggles despite my attempts to keep my personal problems out of the workplace, approached me with unexpected compassion. "Madison, I know something serious is going on in your personal life," she said during a private meeting. "Your work has remained excellent, which is remarkable given the circumstances. The company has an emergency assistance program for employees in crisis. I'd like to recommend you for it." The program provided temporary financial support and legal resources for employees facing extraordinary difficulties. It wouldn't solve everything, but it was a lifeline I desperately needed. The day before our scheduled court date, my parents played their final card. They showed up at my workplace unannounced, creating a scene in the lobby that required security intervention. "We just want to talk to our daughter," my mother wailed dramatically as security escorted them out. "Why is she doing this to our family?" My father was more direct, shouting that I would regret this vendetta and that they would make sure everyone knows what kind of daughter you really are. My colleagues tried to pretend they hadn't witnessed the disturbance, but the damage to my professional reputation was done. I sat at my desk, humiliated and shaking, as my boss helped me file a workplace security report. That night, drowning in anxiety about the next day's court appearance, I received another anonymous email, this time from Amber's boyfriend, Travis. "You should know your parents are in serious financial trouble," he wrote. "Your dad's business is failing, and they've remortgaged their house twice. They were counting on selling your car to pay off some debts. Amber doesn't know I'm telling you this. She thinks their plan to get your car was justified because they've given you so much. I'm breaking up with her after seeing how your family operates. Good luck tomorrow." The pieces suddenly fit together. My parents' desperation wasn't just about maintaining Amber's spoiled lifestyle or punishing me for my independence. They were drowning financially and saw my assets as their lifeline. The realization was both illuminating and heartbreaking. As I prepared for court the next morning, I felt strangely calm. The chaos of the past weeks had burned away any remaining illusions about my family. I wasn't fighting for a car anymore. I was fighting for my right to exist as an independent person with boundaries they couldn't violate. "Whatever happens tomorrow," I told Leah as she helped me select an appropriate outfit for court, "I know I'm doing the right thing. Not just for me, but for any future victim they might target." "I'm proud of you," she said, hugging me tightly. "It takes incredible strength to break free from this kind of manipulation." For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt that strength flowing through me. My parents had spent a lifetime training me to put their needs first, to surrender whatever they demanded, to accept their treatment as normal. Their escalating attacks weren't signs of their power, they were evidence of their panic as that conditioning failed. Tomorrow, in court, they would learn what I had finally accepted. I was no longer theirs to control. The courthouse loomed before me, its stone facade imposing in the morning light. Today would determine not just the legal consequences of my family's actions, but whether I could truly break free from their influence. My hands trembled slightly as I straightened my blazer and ascended the steps. Inside, the courtroom was more crowded than I expected. Word had spread through the family, and both sides of the dispute had gathered supporters. My heart sank as I saw familiar faces divided like opposing armies, aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends who had known me since childhood, now forced to choose sides in a conflict none of us had anticipated. Jennifer met me at the entrance, her calm professionalism steadying my nerves. "Remember, stick to the facts. Don't let emotion overwhelm you if they try to provoke a reaction." I nodded, scanning the room. My parents sat at the defense table with Amber between them, a visual reminder of their united front against me. My mother wore a conservative dress and minimal makeup, clearly aiming for a modest, sympathetic appearance. My father looked grim in his best suit, his jaw set in the stubborn expression I knew all too well. Amber, surprisingly, looked nervous rather than defiant. She kept glancing at the door as if expecting someone. The proceedings began with formal introductions and a summary of the charges. As the prosecutor outlined the case against my family now expanded to include breaking and entering, theft of personal property, identity fraud, and attempted insurance fraud, I watched my parents' expressions closely. My mother maintained a mask of injured dignity, while my father's face darkened with each additional charge. When it was the defense's turn, Martin Green painted an elaborate picture of a loving family torn apart by misunderstandings and my vindictive overreaction to normal family dynamics. He described my parents as devoted caretakers who had only ever acted in the best interests of their children, characterizing the car incident as a well-intentioned miscommunication rather than theft. Your Honor, Green continued smoothly, this case should never have reached a criminal court. The Hayes family has a history of sharing resources. Miss Hayes's sudden refusal to participate in this long-standing family practice, followed by her extreme legal response, suggests underlying motivations beyond the scope of criminal intent. Jennifer's rebuttal was methodical and devastating. She presented the timeline of events, supported by documentation, security footage, and witness statements. The GPS data from my car, the Instagram posts showing Amber with my stolen property, the credit card applications submitted in my name without my consent, the text messages revealing the premeditated nature of the theft. This was not a misunderstanding, Jennifer concluded firmly. This was a calculated series of crimes committed against Miss Hayes by people who believed their familial relationship entitled them to her property and identity. The judge, who had listened attentively throughout, turned to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, do you wish to make a statement before I consider the evidence? My father stood, straightening his tie with practiced confidence. Your Honor, we've clearly made mistakes in how we handled this situation, but our intentions were never criminal. We raised Madison to understand that family supports family. When Amber needed transportation for a career opportunity, we naturally looked to resources within the family. Perhaps we should have discussed it more thoroughly with Madison first, but we never intended to permanently deprive her of her property. It was the closest thing to an admission I'd heard from him, though still wrapped in justification and minimization. My mother rose next, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. We only wanted what was best for both our girls. Madison has always been the strong one, the independent one. Amber needs more support. As parents, we try to balance the needs of our children. If Madison felt hurt by our actions, we deeply regret that, but we were only trying to help our younger daughter succeed. The judge nodded thoughtfully, then turned to me. Miss Hayes, would you like to address the court? I stood, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. Your Honor, this case isn't about a car, or jewelry, or even identity theft, though those are the specific crimes committed. This is about respect for boundaries and the recognition that being family doesn't grant unlimited access to another person's life, property, or future. My parents didn't make mistakes, they made deliberate choices to take what wasn't theirs, then punished me for objecting. I took a deep breath, focusing on the facts as Jennifer had advised. They planned the theft weeks in advance, made a duplicate key without my knowledge, took the vehicle while I was sleeping, and then used my sister's social media to taunt me with what they'd done. When I sought legal protection, they escalated by breaking into my apartment, stealing family heirlooms and important documents, and attempting to commit fraud using my identity. These aren't misunderstandings or well-intentioned mistakes. These are calculated acts of control and retaliation. The courtroom was silent as I finished. Even my parents seemed momentarily subdued. As the judge reviewed the evidence, the courtroom doors opened, and Travis Amber's boyfriend entered, carrying a folder. He approached the defense table and whispered something to Amber, whose face crumpled. She shook her head violently, but Travis stood firm, eventually handing the folder to Martin Green, who looked increasingly alarmed as he reviewed its contents. After a hurried conference, Green requested a brief recess to consult with his clients. The judge granted 15 minutes, during which the courtroom buzzed with speculation. Jennifer leaned over to me. Something's happening. Be prepared for anything. When proceedings resumed, Green approached the bench with a dramatically different demeanor. Your Honor, in light of new evidence provided by a witness, my clients would like to amend their statement. My father looked furious. My mother devastated. As Amber stood shakily, I need to tell the truth, she began, her voice barely audible. Madison didn't know about any of this beforehand. Mom and Dad planned to take her car because Dad's business is failing and they needed money. They were going to sell it and buy me a cheaper car with part of the money. They told me Madison had agreed because she owed them for raising her, but that wasn't true. A murmur ran through the courtroom as Amber continued, now crying openly. They made me post those pictures to upset her, and they made me use her credit to buy things because they said she deserved it for embarrassing the family. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid to say no to them. They've always controlled everything. She looked directly at me for the first time. I'm sorry, Madison. I should have stood up to them, but I was scared of ending up like you, cut off and blamed for everything. My parents exploded simultaneously. My father shouting that Amber was lying. My mother wailing that she was being manipulated. The judge called for order, threatening to clear the courtroom if the disruption continued. When calm was restored, the judge delivered her ruling. My parents were found guilty on all counts, sentenced to probation, community service, and ordered to pay restitution for the stolen items and fraudulent charges. Most importantly, the restraining order was made permanent, legally preventing them from contacting me for at least 2 years. Amber, in exchange for her testimony and cooperation, received a lighter sentence of probation and mandatory counseling. The judge specifically noted that while her actions were criminal, there was evidence of coercion that mitigated her culpability. As the courtroom began to empty, my grandfather approached me, his eyes wet with tears. I had no idea, Madison. None of us did. Your grandmother and I would like to help you recover from this, if you'll let us. One by one, family members who had initially condemned my actions came forward with similar sentiments. They had believed my parents' narrative because it was inconceivable that the family they thought they knew could behave so destructively. My parents were escorted out separately, my father rigid with rage, my mother collapsed in theatrical sobs. They didn't look at me as they passed. Amber lingered awkwardly by the door, Travis beside her. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said when I approached. But I want you to know I'm getting help now, and I saved this. She handed me a small box containing my grandmother's sapphire ring. I never should have taken it. I accepted the ring, feeling the weight of its history. Thank you for telling the truth today. That took courage. You're the one with courage, she replied quietly. You always have been. As I left the courthouse, stepping into the sunlight of a world fundamentally changed, I felt an unfamiliar sensation expanding in my chest. It wasn't joy, exactly, or even relief, though both were present. It was something more profound. The lightness of freedom, the strength of boundaries enforced, the peace of finally being seen for who I really was. The battle had cost me dearly financially, emotionally, and in terms of family relationships. But standing on those courthouse steps, I knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth every painful moment. Some prices, it turns out, are worth paying. 6 months after the court case that changed everything, I stood in the living room of my new apartment, watching the last rays of sunset filter through blinds I'd installed myself. The security system panel glowed reassuringly on the wall, a constant reminder of boundaries now physically enforced. My Audi, fully repaired and bearing a new license plate, was parked in the secure garage downstairs. I'd considered selling it, given all the painful associations, but ultimately decided against letting my parents take this final thing from me. The car represented something important: my hard work, my independence, my refusal to surrender what was rightfully mine. The financial recovery had been slower, between legal fees, therapy costs, and the expense of establishing my new, secure life. My savings had been depleted. I'd had to start over in many ways, carefully rebuilding my credit score after the identity theft damage and creating new financial safeguards to prevent future vulnerabilities. My relationship with Amber remained complicated. True to her word, she had entered therapy and begun the difficult work of understanding our family's toxic dynamics. We occasionally exchanged cautious texts, nothing personal, just check-ins to ensure basic well-being. I wasn't ready for more, and she respected that boundary. My parents, predictably, had refused to accept any responsibility for their actions. Through family grapevine, I heard they had crafted an elaborate narrative casting themselves as victims of my mental instability and ingratitude. They told anyone who would listen that I had fabricated evidence against them out of jealousy toward Amber. They remained legally prohibited from contacting me, though I occasionally discovered evidence of their attempts to monitor my life through mutual acquaintances. The most surprising development had been the outpouring of support from extended family members once the full truth emerged. Aunt Jessica had become a regular presence in my life, filling some of the maternal guidance I'd never properly received. My grandparents, devastated by their daughter's actions, made concerted efforts to rebuild our relationship independent of my parents' influence. But the most meaningful connections came from outside traditional family structures. Leah and her boyfriend Ryan had been unfailingly supportive through every phase of this ordeal. My coworkers, rather than judging me for the family drama that had occasionally spilled into our workplace, had rallied around me with small kindnesses that made difficult days bearable. My boss had even created a flexible work arrangement during the worst periods of legal proceedings and recovery, telling me, "The company invests in talent worth keeping." Her confidence in my professional value had been a lifeline when my personal worth was being systematically attacked. Through intensive therapy, I was gradually unraveling the patterns that had defined my family relationships. My therapist, Dr. Chen, helped me recognize how my parents had conditioned me from childhood to prioritize their needs and Amber's above my own. "What you're experiencing is a form of grief," Dr. Chen explained during one particularly difficult session. "You're mourning the family you thought you had, the parents you deserved but never received." The grief came in waves, sometimes while driving the car that had catalyzed this transformation. Sometimes when encountering family traditions during holidays I now spent with friends rather than relatives. Sometimes when achieving new successes with no one from my immediate family to share them with. But alongside the grief grew something new, a sense of self untethered from my role as the responsible daughter, the family resource, the perpetual giver. I was discovering who Madison Hayes was when not defined in opposition to Amber or in service to my parents. I started painting again, a passion I'd abandoned in college when my mother dismissed it as impractical and my father questioned the expense of art supplies. I joined a community garden, finding peace in the simple rhythm of nurturing growing things. I dated casually, learning to recognize and avoid people who exhibited the controlling traits I'd been conditioned to accept as normal. The most profound change was internal. The hypervigilance that had characterized my life, always anticipating the next demand, the next invasion, the next sacrifice required, was gradually giving way to a cautious trust in my own judgment and the boundaries I'd established. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, my office phone rang with an unfamiliar number. The woman on the line introduced herself as Catherine Donovan, explaining that she worked with my cousin Ryan. "I hope you don't mind him giving me your contact information," she said hesitantly. "I'm in a situation with my family. They took my inheritance from my grandmother and are refusing to return it. Ryan thought you might be willing to talk to me about how you handled your family situation." An hour later, we met at a Kiat cafe near my office. Catherine, nervous and apologetic, shared a story disturbingly similar to my own family members who felt entitled to her resources, who dismissed her boundaries as selfishness, who manipulated and intimidated her when she objected. "I don't know if I can do what you did," she admitted after I shared my experience. "Standing up to them, taking legal action. It seems so extreme." "It is extreme," I acknowledged, "and only you can decide if it's necessary in your situation. But I can tell you this. The hardest part isn't the legal process or even the family fallout. It's giving yourself permission to be the priority in your own life." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed in the months since that morning I discovered my car missing. I had lost my parents and, in many ways, my sister. I had weathered financial hardship, social isolation, and profound grief. But I had gained something essential: the knowledge that I was stronger than the forces that had sought to control me, the certainty that my boundaries were both necessary and valid, and the freedom to build a life defined by my own values rather than others' demands. My car, once a symbol of achievement, now represented something more profound. The moment I decided my self-worth was non-negotiable. As I parked in my secure garage and activated the security system that would alert me to any attempted intrusions, I didn't feel the fear that had initially prompted these measures. Instead, I felt a quiet confidence, not that I would never be hurt again, but that I had proven myself capable of surviving and rebuilding when necessary. The journey from daughter to independent woman had been more difficult and painful than I could have imagined. But standing in my own space, surrounded by choices that were authentically mine, I knew I wouldn't trade this hard-won freedom for any false peace my former compliance had provided. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between maintaining family harmony and standing up for yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for your well-being and self-respect. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about overcoming family challenges. Thank you for listening, and remember that you deserve to be treated with respect, even by the people who claim to love you the most. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that message today.